I think everyone's voice is important, and I think that there are stories that you all have to tell, that you are experts on, that I'm not, that are important. So I'm happy all of you are interested in some form of storytelling, which is an incredibly primal, universal, as far as we know, human experience, human task. So this is a project that I did last year. I've always been interested in spiritual experience and in religion. I've often covered it. And I had this amazing opportunity over the course of really 6 months, including some more researching time, to explore religions in New York. And because New York is a city of immigrants, is so profoundly diverse, we have about every possible religion that exists in the world. And I really actually mean that. I mean, there may be only 3 people practicing it, but we have everything. And I think sort of my impetus was, I believe that religion, that religious devotion is rarely understood, well understood. Many people just think it's a matter of superstition, or they just don't understand what that's about. And even if they do, they mostly understand just their religion and not other people's religions. And one of the things that photography does so well is it shows a shared humanity. So, the cultural differences are important, but I believe we're much more alike than different. And I found this, very much in this work, which a lot of this was research, probably a month and a half. I don't know how many of you are interested in photography, but I would say the research, of finding just a wide array of things to choose from and knowing what to choose. So I know a lot about the larger religions. I really feel pretty knowledgeable about all forms of Christianity and Judaism and Islam. But there's a lot of other religions I was not very knowledgeable on. I just knew a little bit. I'd been there once maybe. And so I had to find out to know that the places I was choosing and the people I was choosing were other people who were involved in that religion would find authentic, because I wouldn't be able to judge myself. So actually, just right before you came, the man who was the witch down here at the bottom in the middle was here viewing it. Earlier, the woman doing the thing by the beach, the fire, she's Hindu from Guyana. One of the things that New York has is a tremendous amount of what they call syncretism, is a mixing of religious influences. So, a lot of this obviously is the photography and the choosing. We chose for each borough one main place to spend time in, and then other places to show the diversity. And, in some ways, of course, the photographing is very important. And I really worked hard on that, actually. And I actually think I did as well as I've ever done at it. I'm really pleased. But, it's so much of it is also the process of being with people, of having people be comfortable, of having them trust you, having them know you, and the ability to be, in a way, intimate, right? And that's a core thing in documentary photography, and something I think is really important to strive for if this is the type of work you want to do. There's all kinds of photography, obviously. But, So, for me, it was a very deep experience. It was very profound. And to see the breadth, because in a way it also, for me, captures New York City, right? I think it's the beauty of New York, myself, is the diversity. That's the strength of New York, is that we're a city of, immigrants, if not immigrants from other countries, immigrants from other parts of the country. And I was able also to really show that in this work. And I think so much of, so it's funny, when you're learning photography, you have to really learn technique, you have to think about composition, and that's really your chore, your task at the beginning. And I say beginning, it might be first 5 or 10 years, right? But that's ultimately not what it is, right? That's the ticket that allows you to do this work, but the work isn't that at all. I mean, there is visual elements, but it's really the thinking, the critical thinking, and the being with people and understanding what you're doing and communicate, in a human way. And I've been so lucky to be able to do this work. I've been at the Times 31 years as staff, 4 years before as a freelancer. And I love, I'm just so fortunate, but I get to see all of this. I get to see everything in the world. Things I would never see, meet people I would never meet. And this is like a ticket. Being a journalist, and particularly being a photographer, is like a ticket to experience life and experience the world in different ways. And just as importantly, I think particularly for you all, is it's also an ability to communicate. Because even though you may not feel it and people may not express this to you, but the world desperately needs to know your stories. If I was doing a story about someone who was 16, I could do the story, of course. I'm a journalist, but I'd miss all sorts of things. I can't remember when I was 16 hardly. It was so long ago. We all have our areas of interest, and then also by lived experience, our areas of expertise as well. So whether it's photographing, writing, whatever it is, but I hope you feel emboldened to speak out in all kinds of ways. Are there any questions?
So I noticed that
It won't stretch.
I feel like I noticed the way you tell your stories in the pictures, the way you kept looking at it, it described the memory for you, right? But you also said you gained knowledge too as well.
Oh yeah.
So my thing is, what would you say in overall, after all these pictures, what kind of energy do you receive, like the knowledge that you brought, that made you view certain things like that?
I like the way you asked that question in two ways, because knowledge and energy. So knowledge, okay, I never heard of this religion, and I thought I really knew religion. This is called Bon, B-O-N. It is the indigenous Tibetan native religion pre-Indian Buddhism coming there. And very interesting. It's all a fascinating combination of things, including shamanism, but really just spectacularly interesting. The temple that practices Yoruba religion and cultural practices from Yoruba, which is where the Haitian voodoo and the Santeria comes from, directly from West Africa, that enslaved people brought with them when they were brought to West. And that I knew less about. So there's a knowledge, in a technical sense, and information I learned a lot. There is feelings of what it's about, because religion isn't, spiritual experience isn't literal. right? Ritual is specific and great for photographers. People wear clothes, they do things. Ritual's amazing. But, the actual inner experience is harder to photograph. And that's sort of what I'm looking at. And energy, there's so many of these places I really felt something, deep, and different things, because different religions sort of, looking at different things. So, Eastern Orthodoxy at the end, or Catholicism, sometimes in some ways that it's practiced, there's not only one Catholicism, obviously, but in some ways it's mystical, right? In other ways, in some other forms, it's magical, almost, or passionate. So energy, a great deal, and information, just about everywhere. Even the things I knew about, I now know more about, or I feel closer to. And I really like that. I'm interested in this subject, but again, it's what you do as a documentary photographer. You'll see Oscar will be speaking soon. What you do as a documentary photographer, what you do as a journalist, is you get to experience everything. And then you have this deep responsibility, deep and profound, that they should be able to recognize themselves when they see themselves here. Because I can make pretty photos. I'm a decent photographer. I'm going to make photos that don't look bad. But that's not really what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get photographs that are some way revealing, that are, it's a difficult word to use, but are truthful. And photographs that they, in this instance, feel seen as well. Because if they feel seen, then I got it right in this kind of storytelling, in a non-news storytelling. Yes?
Could you share about your experience of being welcomed into these
Yes.
intimate spaces, especially they're such diverse spaces, right?
Yes, and I'll also talk about how I was able to get this to happen. So, as I said before, my underlying thesis was most people don't understand religious life, and if they do, they don't understand they only understand their own religion. Well, it turns out everyone wanted other people to understand them better. Even in Santeria, I had a little less access for photographing. It's the detail there, but they were willing to talk for hours. There were just a lot of things they didn't want photographed. So, and then it's having the conversation, being authentically yourself, right? Not trying to be someone else or say what you think is supposed to be said, but it's being honest and straightforward. And you develop a relationship, trust. And it was really interesting because I had no real problem. Sometimes it took a while to get the connection. So I had to talk to 4 people. I had photographed voodoo once before, Haitian voodoo, but that time it took me 4 people. Someone who would know someone who would know, who would know someone who would know, who would then know someone who's practicing who could possibly let me do this. And now we're good friends. It's having some knowledge about it also. Like, it's a dual thing. One, having done some work, but the most powerful thing I find in my work, and I've only come to this way of saying it in the last decade, is I'm not the expert on your story. I need your help to tell your story, right? I want to learn what it is, and then you have to help me figure out what are the things that are important to photograph. And I think that's true. It's really important to photograph, particularly any story where you're an outsider, with humility. That's super important. It's also the most powerful thing you can say to people. To say, help me, and we're doing this together. Any other thoughts or questions? Can you come up so they can hear your question too?
So, do you believe that there's religion and community organizations also being known as, referred to gangs, but where I grew up in that culture, So
Okay.
my thing is, I never really seen it from my side of view.
Okay.
But I always seen it as it's part of the history, it's part of our culture. Is it? Would you say it's part of religion?
Well, I mean, I would say, what I would say is this, and you'd have to answer that because I didn't grow up there. But what I would say is this, that there are any number of ways of having spiritual experiences, and they are not all within the context of religion. It might be on a mountaintop somewhere. It might be listening to music that you love. There's many ways of having spiritual experiences. And there are many ways of finding community. And part of being part of a religion is finding community often, usually. And so you have all these things that are going on. You find community. And often, so, looking at, let's say, the first photograph, the church in Corona, Queens, which is an enormous church, probably has 12,000 people on a weekend. They have 13 masses between Saturday night and Sunday, and except for the one that's in English, all full. And so, in religion, community is important, and friendship is important. So in no way would I say not. I'm not experienced enough to know, and I haven't studied it. Now, there is a photographer here, Joe Rodriguez. He's not here today, but you might see his work, who could speak to that. But I think you're the one to answer it. And so what's your answer? What? Yes. Well, yeah. Right? There's a lot of ways to find these things.
I think it's a matter of faith in the community you're in.
Okay.
Part of it.
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it. Anyone else? Any thoughts? Yes? Layla?
Is this a continuous project? Do you plan on expanding and going to other countries?
Well, in a way, it's a continuous project because it's a result of work I've done over my whole career. I've always had an interest in religion, and I've done a bunch of stories during COVID. I did as well. So I'm sure I will continue to do stories on the subject. I do want to do a book on it. This would be the core. Yes, but I don't feel the need to go to other countries, actually. I want it to be New York. One, for my love of New York. Two, because you can find the world in New York. Literally. I mean, that's, we had to be selective. There were so many other sects, religions that would have made sense, but I couldn't do over 30. It wasn't practical. That's the lifetime work. So, for me, absolutely. And very often people do projects long term. Again, going back to Joe Rodriguez, he had a story from 20 years ago of gang members in LA, or 25, and then them growing up, them being older, and being parents and grandparents, and then most recently, the people who are never coming out of jail but are still in jail. Same themes, different iterations. Usually documentary photographers or journalists, they have a handful of things they're just passionate about. And when people are doing stories and projects, what I recommend really strongly is to find something that you feel passionately about. Great work, in my mind, comes from three things. Passion. No, actually, first thing is time spent. Second thing is time spent. First thing is passion. Passion, time spent, and obsession. So to do great work, you have to put in the time. Oscar or I can take good photographs in a day, no problem. We just know how to do it. We've done it so long. But we can't make the deeply meaningful photos in one day, right? So you spend the time, you care about it profoundly, and so much so that you have no choice but to do it. And these are the things, whether you're a photographer or a writer or a painter, whatever it is you do, a filmmaker, that's what you want to do, is if you focus on what's meaningful, you'll do your best work. And that's also what will get you ahead in any of these fields. So, yes?
Where in Brooklyn was that taken?
Oh, well, that's a good question. It's the one, where in Brooklyn was that taken? Okay, so they are based in Brooklyn. This is the singular photograph not taken in Brooklyn, in New York. No, absolutely. No, so they are based in Brooklyn, but they go up along the Hudson to northern Westchester to a park that's a little secluded, and every year they do this ceremony on a Sunday. It's an offering to a spirit of water. I forget the name of the spirit now. Essentially, yes. I'm not positive if that's what they call it, but yes, it's Ian Munchong. Absolutely. No, it is. I don't think they use that name. I think they use the African name, but it's exactly the same spirit. So, yeah. But they are from New York, and mainly that's where their temple is. Astute question. Okay. Can you come up here?
Have you ever been to Ecuador?
Unfortunately not. I would like to meet and go to Ecuador. I've got to travel some, but nowhere near as much as I wish. You've probably been to Ecuador, no? Okay, so ask him that question. And there's a lot of, also in New York you'll find these religions, these shamanistic practices found in mountains, like in Ecuador, in Peru, and we were just talking about this. I mean, they may not be thousands of people practicing, but there's people practicing everything here. And if you look at Santeria, I personally believe it's easily one of the 6 largest religions in New York. And no one has numbers, no one follows. But if you go into people's houses throughout New York, it's heavily practiced, and a lot of other religions which are not come from the Abrahamic religions are so widely practiced here. Okay. Well, I'm so happy you came. And really a pleasure to talk with all of you. I'm looking forward to those of you who are photographers seeing your exhibits in 3, 4, 5 years. Well, who's next then?